Let me welcome you to the Institute of International Relations. I'm very happy for the fact that this event is taking place here at our institute. The institute is doing its best to serve as a hub, as a meeting point between the academia, between the analytical world, political world, think tank world, and also we try to serve as a hub for the international communication of the Czech views on international relations. From what I've learned, this is precisely the kind of an event that very well fits into this agenda, because this is an event where we would like you to welcome to share your experiences, to share your insights on the very important topic of stability and prospects for future stabilization and democracy in the area of the Balkan world. I am very happy for the support of the European Commission for this project and for this meeting, for the MEC event agency in Berlin, and I would like to also thank to Ondřej Horký and to Tomáš Dopita for making that happen. The entire international or European setting these days and these months show how much it is important to understand the dynamics and to help the dynamics towards further stabilization and development of the European neighborhood. And so I'm very much looking forward to see and to hear what the experts and the community of those of you who are deeply involved in this process. I'm very much looking forward to see and to hear what you have to say. Having said that, I would not like to keep your time, to steal your valuable time. I would like to give the floor directly to Ondřej, who will be chairing the first session. And once again, I would like to wish you a very fruitful discussion. And once again, I would like to thank you for coming here. And I'll just move here because I will be the least important person here in the room from now on. And I'm looking forward to see what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michal. So I'm Ondřej Horký, and I've been moderating not only this first panel, but also the second panel, having that first panel to present the program more broadly, more theoretical panel with the presentation of the transfer of European norms to Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the presentation of the European Union's Pre-accession Assistance instrument. First of all, I would like to present our first two speakers. On my left side, Tomáš Dopita, who is a research fellow at this institute, and also Mr. Henk Visser from the European Commission, who is in charge of programming for the IPA instrument. But also, since the goal of this event is to share experiences and not to have just like a one-way transfer of experience that wouldn't really work, perhaps it would be a good idea to present also yourselves to know who is the audience, and to know from the start who is your experience, who is your background. So I think the name and the institution might suffice to you. Can we start here, please?
Hello, my name is Benjamin Tirat, and I'm from the University of Bordeaux, University.
I'm Martin Skalsky from Arnica Association, Czech NGO.
I'm Martin Vedral, and I'm from Institute of International Studies from the Charles University.
I'm Christina Nadiko, I'm basically from the same department from Charles University.
Yeah, Němec, I'm from the Parliamentary Institute, the Chamber of Deputies, and University of Economics.
Hello, Barbara Latečkováček, UNDP Trust Fund, Transfer of Czech Experience.
Hello, my name is Aida Champal, the First Secretary in the Embassy of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Prague.
Ivana Bejčková from the Czech Development Agency responsible for the Balkans.
My name is Veronika Ulmanová, and I'm from the Ministry of the Environment responsible for the cooperation with Western Balkan countries.
My name is Namik Hadžović, I come from the United Nations Development Program in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Can we continue with words?
My name is Ivana Peňová, and I study in Charles University.
My name is Pavla Zutirova, and I'm representing today the Bulgarian Embassy, and I'm also a student of international relations in Metropolitan University Prague.
Hi, my name is Michal. I work at the Czech Development Agency.
Hello, my name is Michal. I'm a student at the Masaryk University and I'm also an intern at the Institute of International Relations.
Hello, my name is Stefan Šantruček. I'm from the Czech Development Agency.
Hi, my name is Gianluca Rigetti. I'm from John Cabot University.
I'm a basic student of Metropolitan University International Relations.
My name is Jiří Vacina. I'm a student of International Relations at the University of Economics.
My name is Teresa Bořáková. I study at Metropolitan University International Relations and European Studies, and I'm an intern at Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
I'm Tadeusz from the Hungarian Embassy here in Prague.
I'm Gordana Ruponović Mihajlović, Embassy of Michal, Serbia.
My name is Peter Jarosko. I am now retired, but I am former specialist for delivery of turnkey factories in abroad.
My name is Luzimiev. I am coming from the Embassy of the Republic of Kosovo in Prague.
I'm Ida Manton. I'm trainer in international negotiations, teaching in Prague part-time. That's why I'm here at the moment. But other than that, I come from Macedonia and I have worked in the Balkans for over 10 years in international organizations.
My name is Katarzyna Mezabrenia and I work at the Embassy of the Czech Republic.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm really happy we have so many people concerned with local democracy in Western Balkans, and I wouldn't wait more and give the floor to Tomáš Dopita to give us a more, say, theoretical, broader view of the current state of affairs in Bosnia. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrzej. I'm very happy to be here and to speak to such an audience, and as I've heard, I think you guys really have a lot to say about this, and I hope I will not be too boring for you. But I will try to frame the event today with some kind of theoretical insight on how is it with the European norms and Bosnia and Herzegovina. In this, I understand norms as something we all maybe understand as something what is good to be done and what is appropriate, and in what we to some extent disagree with Bosnia and Herzegovina, or with some sections or clusters within Bosnia and Herzegovina, because yeah, it starts. But in general, we can say we may assert that Bosnia and Herzegovina's internal structure today is regarded to some extent illegitimate by the international community. This notion of illegitimacy expresses itself in for example, in a set of conditions formulated by the in a set of conditions formulated by the international community and demanding internal change in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Probably now the most well-known instance of this is the June 2009 ruling of the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights on the case of Sejdić and Finci versus Bosnia and Herzegovina. This ruling deems the procedures for election of the tripartite state presidency and the House of Peoples, which is the upper chamber of the state parliament in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as discriminatory and conflicting with the European Convention of Human Rights. These institutions are opened just for the people identifying themselves as Bosniak Croats or Serbs, the constitutive nations of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But this is just only one of the aspects of the notion of illegitimacy I want to talk about. The deeper concern, maybe, lies in understanding or conviction that Bosnia and Herzegovina is not able to effectively govern itself on its own. This conviction is, for example, confirmed by the fact that there has been no reaction towards the European Court of Human Rights ruling until now, the Sejdić-Finci case, or there has been no resolution to the state property and defense property issues, for example. These two things are, I would say, effectively the last two main conditions which need to be fulfilled in order for the OHR, the seat of international administration, to be closed down in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The core of the current constitutional and political system of Bosnia and Herzegovina was, of course, we know that it was envisioned in the Dayton Peace Agreement, and it was sponsored by international community. It was pressured. It was made under pressure of the US, and it was then witnessed by the representatives of the EU, France, Germany, Russia, United Kingdom, and the USA. So, to a big, also international community in the Dayton created a big and strong mandate for the international community to interfere into the internal matters of Bosnia and Herzegovina and to enforce the Dayton Agreement. So from this short look into the recent history, we can say that the international community has been a strong and constitutive element in the post-Dayton development of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we may ask, how come that the international community, if we simplify it, is saying today that Bosnia and Herzegovina's internal structure is illegitimate when it took a major part in creating it. So I think the story of how this happened is quite interesting, and I dare to propose a specific periodization of the post-Dayton development in Bosnia, dividing this time into 3 periods. I name them simply as imposition, push, and pull. This is not really arbitrary. I am trying in this typology to illustrate the change in the basic relationships between the international community and the international at large and the local at the time after Dayton entered into force. So, immediately after the war, the international community focused mainly on the stabilization of security situation in the country, mainly through military separation of the combatants. But it also started with building the political institutions envisioned in the Dayton Treaty. Only 9 months after the signing of the treaty, general elections took place in Bosnia. Some people said it was too early, but anyway, it happened. Early elections at that time were justified because they were believed to initiate the process of post-war reconciliation and democratization via creating new institutions which would hopefully create a new political elite which is more legitimate and more peaceful, let's say. For time constraints, I will leave aside the other activities and priorities of the international actors in this period. I will also put aside the issue of how these different activities and priorities has collided with each other, how they conflicted. But for now and for this presentation, it is important to know that in this mixture of security and provisions for representative democracy, the international community imposed the basic structures of the state envisioned in the Dayton Treaty. It imposed it upon the territory, it created the borders and the internal borders, upon the polity and upon the society of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Therefore, I call this period imposition. Roughly, it was the first 4 years after Dayton. In 2000, the game has changed to a big extent because there were democratic changes in Croatia and in Serbia. These countries stopped sponsoring parallel structures and maybe even some hopes inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has changed the situation. The security situation was already stabilized and the mechanisms of representative democracy were largely established at that moment. But this was still regarded unsatisfactory, mainly because of the overall fragmentation of the state. If we sum it up, there are 2 cantons, 2 entities, and 1 extra district, and a weak state on top of it. And this all is flavored by the special rights for the constitutive nations. Well, this did not lead towards a sustainable democratic process, and instead it seemed to be a fractured and polarized polity without functional economic space and without environment where everyone could feel equally safe at all the places all around Bosnia and Herzegovina. So at this point, the international community assumed a strong leadership and attempted to integrate the whole state somehow further. This goal went to some extent, maybe to a large extent, already beyond the mandate enshrined in the Dayton Treaty, and the international actors were aware of it. This is one of the reasons why all the important reforms which were implemented in Bosnia in these years, they were in the end agreed to by the local representatives. For example, this is the case of establishment of the indirect taxation body at the level of the state, or creation of a unified army in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In these reforms, the letter of Dayton was exceeded or somehow transcended, but the spirit, let's say, it was respected because the rights of the constitutive nations and the territorial setup within Bosnia and Herzegovina was respected. However, in this period, the international community used the toolbox of the toolbox which it acquired in the Dayton Treaty and even shortly after in the Bonn summit, and it used these instruments to push these reforms further. The main role was played by the Office of High Representative, which used his powers to sometimes even set respect or maybe even fear into the hearts of the politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to make them to implement the things which he wanted to be implemented. Therefore, I call this period as a period of push of Dayton. Maybe you've heard about it. But this executive and legislative authority of the OHR, Office of High Representative, has weakened over time. I forgot to go on with this. Yeah, so this is about the imposition. It was in the years 2000, till 2000, let's say. Then push, it was within the years roughly 2000 till 2004. And so this authority of the OHR has weakened. Several commentators, international institutions, as well as some states, have pointed out that strong role of the OHR makes the local system unsustainable because it actually hinders establishment of genuine accountability between the people and their elected representatives. So it was the one part of the problem. But also the local actors, chiefly from the Republika Srpska, have increasingly challenged the OHR and to a big extent have gained the upper hand. So this way the magic of the OHR as the main instrument of extensive state building ended effectively with the end of 2004. Since 2005 the bond powers were used on occasions to keep Bosnia and Herzegovina running, but there was no attempt to push through a major reform with the use of bond powers later on. So, in 2005 there comes the third period, which I call the pull of Brussels. The vision of, it has strong logic, the vision of European integration is virtually the only feature which the local actors, at least rhetorically, hold in common. So it's a common goal, a common norm, we can say. So at this point, when the push of Dayton had lost its strength, the international reforms demanded from Bosnia and Herzegovina were tied to the European integration. On the first side, this period is not very successful because the reform process got virtually stalled. There has not been much improvement, let's say, in Bosnia since then. But with a closer look, there are some small successes to spot and mention. These are namely the reforms accompanying the visa liberalization with the European Union, which took place in December 2010 effectively, and also the holding of the census in October 2013. These things were effectively thinked up and implemented by the local actors. But other reforms are waiting, as mentioned earlier. Moreover, the country of Bosnia and Herzegovina is in desperate economic and social situation which needs answers of its kind. But the fact that since 2005 the international community is not heavily involved in the political life of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and because it is not imposing or pushing through decisions, but only pulling with Brussels, this gives some answer to the previous question I asked, and it gives some plausibility to the arguments formulated by the representatives of the international community, arguing that the Bosnia and Herzegovina's internal structure is unjustified and illegitimate, and moreover arguing that it's upon the local actors that they change it. So, in this period, the international actors have put a lot of effort in explaining that they are not those who are to be expected to push the agenda, and they put the responsibility upon the shoulders of the local actors. The point is that the current political elites are rather reluctant to do these steps. And to be honest, it's no big surprise, at least for me, because the fragmentation and polarization of current politics in Bosnia and Herzegovina is one of the main sources of their political power. So why to change it? Therefore, it's not very logical to change it and to, for example, put interests of citizens in front of the interests of the national groups they are representing. But at this point, I think, that the pull of Brussels is at this moment the best thing we from the outside can hold to when we are thinking about how to influence Bosnia and Herzegovina today. Therefore, it is, I think, appropriate to think about how to make the pull of Brussels the best and strongest possible. Maybe we are here for this reason as well. In this vein, two main topics have been largely discussed, and I will just throw them up here for further discussion. First is the question of how to interact with the unprivileged people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because they are the ultimate source of their political representatives' legitimacy and power. In general, if general popular attitudes change, then we may hope that the political representatives change, which may help to make the pull of Brussels stronger. And if we look at the content of the discussion panel which follows after the coffee break today, then it's clear that there is already a lot of people and a lot of institutions working on this issue. Generally, there is in my understanding, there is somehow a trend to simply skip or neutralize the Bosnian and Herzegovinian politicians and deal with the social and economic issues somehow directly without them. What is a big question for me is, in this respect, actually, is how to transform the energy released in the recent mass protests and subsequent civic initiatives, which we can observe now in Bosnia and Herzegovina, how to transform this into a meaningful political input. And second point, second area I would like to throw up is the question of how to steer better the pull of Brussels. Only when Brussels and its pull is well organized and focused, we might expect the desirable outcomes to materialize. Well, the European Union has its delegation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and many European Union member states have their embassies there. So, among other activities, the European Union delegation works on IPA funds, for example. We will hear about it soon, and the member states disburse, for example, their own bilateral aid in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there is probably a lot of space for cooperation between and among the member states institutions with the delegation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this is one avenue to go, I think. And the last thing I would like to point at is the issue and the question of OHR. There is kind of a strong discussion on the OHR. Shall it be closed or not? At this moment, effectively, the OHR is not authorized to use the Bonn special powers anymore, but some countries, especially, for example, the USA, Turkey, and the UK, and also largely the Czech Republic, are convinced that the OHR should continue to exist. In this perspective, the OHR is perceived as a safety switch in the case of emergency. It is also argued that the OHR should be closed only after all the prescribed conditions have been met, which we have heard about. These arguments are important and salient, but if we take the point of view of the pull of Brussels, as I have talked about, then the OHR seems to be somewhat redundant and outdated institution. It's there, but it's not doing much. It's quite costly, and it takes a lot of attention. And it functions as a cheap and easy punching bag for the local nationalist and national political leaders. So it's a big question on its function and on its future. So this is the end of my contribution today. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much, Tomáš. You gave us, I think, the picture of a quite difficult still post-conflict difficult situation in Bosnia with some reforms, but also the problems of legitimacy and representation. And at the same time, I think an interesting thing that you mentioned is that the EU accession prospect is perhaps one of the rare things that put all the Bosnians together. So in this situation, I think it's a big challenge for the European Commission. So please, Mr. Visser, what is the EU in this situation doing and how?
Sometimes
may I just ask for my colleagues for changing the slides? We're going to do that soon.
Yes, I'm not sure whether I'm a pull or a push. I'm quite pushy. So perhaps, but we do have a carrot. So then I will the stick, and then the instrument of pre-accession assistance, version 2.0. At least that's how I wanted to call it. Because if it's 2.0, it reminds me of software, so we have upgrades. But the hierarchy decided to call it just instrument of pre-accession assistance 2, and then in the Roman way. And that's a carrot. And carrot which we have held forward towards Bosnia as well, and we've taken part of it back. As you may have heard, a lot of funds which were made available, was reserved for Bosnia, have not been given to the Bosnian politicians, especially the national ones, because you could almost say, we don't really trust them, that they do it right. But are we the best to teach the others how to deal with funds and governance? Okay, I can give you my personal views on that as well. Personal, because I don't want to be fired by saying something bad. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with slides, so we're going very quickly to the slides. The slides is the standard presentation which I always have with me. This is helpful because I spend the last days after my holidays at home taking care of my wife, appealing to motherly instincts, because she decided to go skiing and her mother instincts came forward and my daughter was going a bit too fast from the slopes. So my wife on her skis tried to break my daughter, and with that she twisted her knee. So she was not very mobile, so I stayed with her, and therefore, thank God, I have my journal presentation which you can always use. So I start with that, and going through the slides very quickly, because if those who are interested can always call me, and then I'll do it all over the phone again, or put it on YouTube or whatever, or I can give them the slides if the organizers don't take care of that. Anyway, we've had IPA 1, IPA, EIPA, whatever you want to call it, Instrument of Pre-accession Assistance number 1. We have now number 2, which apparently should be better, but sometimes I'm very doubtful when bureaucrats like me say that things are better. It reminds me of washing powder. Every year or so there's a new formula, but the end result is still that I have stains in my shirts. Anyway, well, this is the whole history behind it. You heard about Europe 2020 and the new strategy moving forward, the new approach. Well, that needs to be reflected also in our support outside the EU. So this is how we all got to where we are now, basically an adopted decision. The new approach links to what we have in a total view to how to support everything outside the EU zone countries. Well, we are one element in that, and you see next is our neighbor, the neighborhood instrument, and there is a good chance that we're going to have a new customer in the Ukraine, because my commissioner said on German TV, if the situation goes the way it goes with Ukraine, the EU may use its strongest weapon called enlargement. So we're again back to the stick. The guiding principles for the instrument of pre-accession. Okay, you don't throw anything away which you did before. We build on that, and there's a good report which shows what we've been doing with your money in 2012. We continue with spending the money which was already reserved for 2013 and 14 and sometimes 15. Anyway, what we said, and that links also a bit to what my previous speaker said about financial assistance, donor coordination, all that, we want to do that better. And you see it very coming forward. Stronger ownership by the beneficiaries, and a reinforced link between the assistance and the political agenda, and between the different types of assistance. Okay, it's all beautiful, and that. It was adopted a bit late. It's always like that in the EU, but we made it active retroactively. So doesn't really have that much importance, but it has an importance for the people who want to get the money in the end. I have to look over my shoulder because I'm not like Barack Obama who has these things, so I have to remind myself what I have been writing down. The main changes, well, you see here that it has the main objective remains accession driven, but we're going to look more into the policies areas. One of the very fundamental things for us is good governance, and that means it's an euphemic word more or less for no more corruption. So we come forward with limited sectors, 5 of them, which say you have to target on that. I'm going through what is most relevant for those which we are going to address as a way to improve the governance, to improve the political climate, to support in a way the public sentiment that things should go better, in particular in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that's the support which we give to civil society. So this is all beautiful, you can all read, so you all see. And then we go to what we want to achieve in this civil society field with the instrument of pre-accession by linking it to the objectives. Objective 1 is straightforward. We want to strengthen the political reforms, and therefore we have to strengthen the democracy in the countries. When I was dealing with the previous enlargement, under the FARA support, I once had to do as an expert for the Commission. I was not in the Commission yet, so then I was still an expert. No, I'm not. And it's to public administration reform in Romania. And one of the questions I asked the task manager at the time, what do you do with the politicians? And he said, nothing, because we're not allowed. And I said, then you fail. And I think that is confirmed with what we do in the Western Balkans. If we do not teach the politicians what their role is to be a politician, we're going to have very poor politics. And that results in a poor administration. Leadership as we have today is no longer leading, it's mainly following sentiments. And sentiments are not the best guidance in my view for governance. So, again, I say this as a personal note, don't want to be sued. For us it's important that we anyway deal with the institutions. That's where we allow. You will later on hear something about local authorities. It's my true belief that if we really want to work at the national politics, we have to start local. Let's call it the birth chamber of politicians, the national politicians. So we have to make them open and perceptive that the promotion and protection of human rights is not a threat, but it's in their advantage. Because whenever you want to turn it, we always are, once in our lives, a minority. So we need to protect yourself is by protecting minorities. It is very difficult in a country which has been divided so strongly, in a region which is so heavily divided, but we have to focus. And of course we focus also on issues which are dear to us, our norms. And it's very difficult, of course, to defend to football hooligans that they have to respect lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, intersexual, allied and queers, but they have to do it. So we have to spread that message, which is very hard in these countries. Look at the example we recently had with Russia in the Olympic Winter Games. Regional cooperation, good neighborhood relations, it's building up better. Sometimes I wonder it's easier for them to work with someone from another country across the border than to work with their direct neighbor. Well, let's work on that way and see how we can develop that further. We have cases where I've been told that people rather like their old, if they're in Bosniaks, they would like to have the old own Serbs back than to have the Bosnian refugees in their village. So because they have no roots. So it starts gradually getting ground. So making peace is not done very quickly. And like my previous speakers pointed out, I always say that Dayton was more or less a ceasefire peace agreement, but it was not a way to really define the constitution of the country. Reconciliation, peace building, fight against corruption. It's only at number 5, but in our hearts and souls it's at number 1. You cannot have a country, a vibrant economy, a country which has some chances to get some economic prosperity if you have corruption. The links between organized crime and the national politicians is, I dare say, too strong. It's very dangerous. In certain countries, if the leaders are always the same, is that a good sign of a strong democracy, or is that just a weakness? There are some countries in the group which we're very worried about. For me, it should be also at least the second, but it's now number 8 on this listing. That's just like that. Development of civil society. And we put deliberately civil society, not civil society organizations, because it's my firm belief and experience that some of these civil society organizations are not really civil enough, if you catch my drift. But the main thought behind it, a lot of citizens do not trust civil society organizations, but they themselves are part of civil society as a citizen. So we have to get that civil society thinking through. And that links also to the social dialogue. We, of course, want the countries to join a European Union which is not just a market, but it's also a social shelter for those who have not the opportunities as others may have had. Okay, so that was objective on the political side. The second objective goes to the more social economic development side. We have, in my view, neglected that a little bit too much in the Instrument of Pre-accession Assistance version 1. It was very much about accession-driven, adopting laws, basically the experience we had in the support on the FARE. But there we had an economy which was going very well. Now we're facing an economic crisis, difficult economic situation, so we really have to invest there as well, because what will a citizen care about the European Union if he or she doesn't have a job? So for the most important is to develop also the economy there. Hopefully linking them up, because there were links, and there's links which getting apparent again. That involves the whole spectrum, an integrated approach. We should not, disregard that we have to deal also with research and development and innovation to make the country competitive, which means we have to invest in human capital, which means we also have to make sure that those which are not getting close to the fire don't freeze to death. So we have to make sure that the vulnerable groups also have a chance to get a job, because otherwise it creates for social unrest. Well, that all nicely distills to an annex which we've added to the Instrument of Pre-accession Assistance Regulation, Annex 2, which provides the priorities for the assistance. These are the priorities we see them for, and I put in bold those which were relevant for civil society, where we focus again on the same issues as before: strong, good public administration, strengthening the capacity of civil society, making sure the voices of citizens are heard even outside elections. And the same goes also in the area where we talk about cross-border cooperation. The Instrument of Pre-accession Assistance, which previously had 5 components and all brought into one, but they always had an element which cross-border cooperation. Partly is done by us, partly is done by DG regional policy, and some is done with the European neighbourhood policy. These are more or less mirroring the priorities and the thematic priorities also as towards the mainstream Instrument of Pre-accession Assistance. Well, this is a nice table, if you like pyramids. Good. The rules of application. I'm not going to bore you too much on it, but for you important to know that whenever we do something, we make a general blah blah text, and then we try to detail this blah blah text in another text. In this case, it's the rules of application. It's here to complete, to give you more guidance. Everybody's interested in financial support. What is more important for everybody who wants to do something for us is to make sure that the credo which we have now is that whenever we're going to give financial support, it has to fit within the strategy. In the Western Balkans, the people are very good at making strategies, but they're lousy in implementing them. So now we said, okay, you make a country strategy and you think about the implementation, because the implementation will be supported by the instrument of pre-accession assistance. So if it's not in their strategy, we will not be able to financially support it. So whenever somebody says this is a very important priority, needs to be dealt with in my particular country in the Western Balkans, they will need to make sure it's in their strategy, one way or another. We, for a multi-country, also have a multi-country strategy. The target, the priorities, and particularly the reform efforts for the next 7 years. That's our perspective we look at. That's to do with our financial perspective, which is always 7 years. We do it with us in lead and them providing the input, them the countries. Okay, we moved from the traditional approach looking at what needs to be done with the adoption of our whole legislative text and judgments and all that stuff, to more what do we do as in the different sectors. Not sectors as like agriculture and all that, but the sectors and sort of general approach which is being used by the World Bank and other international financial institutions, where we look dialogue, reform. Okay. Of course, we always look for ways to demonstrate what we do, and this is quite a nice thing about what we have done, but we really want to be able to demonstrate the impact. What does it change really on the ground? And I take it hard, the criticism which we receive is that the citizens on the ground do not see anything from the IPA support. And that's bad. They should be able to recognize some support and not just a billboard saying this road has been built with money from the instrument of pre-accession assistance. Well, I just mentioned about the country strategy paper, which follows basically also the national strategies and all that. Essential for us before we give support, and that's why I would like to share that with you, is that it needs to have relevance for our accession and relevance for the social economic development. They should not do it because it's linked to EU accession, but they should also do it because it will strengthen their own economy. We are now starting already drafting a program. Tomorrow we'll have a first meeting on what we're going to do to support civil society. I think some of them are coming from that field, at least are associated with that, and therefore I'll just say a few things about that. We support civil society because we think, based on our previous experience of enlargement, that it is essential to have it to accept the values, norms, which we have as an EU. I mentioned minority rights and all that. We also think that politicians have to learn that democracy is not just every 4 years, but it's a daily thing. So you can say, I've been elected by these people, so I'm going to only help them, but then you're not ruling a country, you're just taking care of your own flock. So we need to make sure that in between the elections, citizens still have the possibility to inform, put it like that, their politicians about the needs which as they see them. To also state where they note where improvements have to be done. So, and that we want to push and pull both sides into getting into dialogue with each other. It's great that you draft a strategy for your country, but we would like them to know, did you check this with your citizens? Is this really what's necessary for your country? Or is this what some of your friends said you have to do? We therefore created the civil society facility, whose main goal is to strengthen participatory democracy. But it's very hard to have a participatory democracy if the part of civil society which we work with is not able to do the basic things in public affairs. I sometimes say that most of the civil society organizations are very good in shouting boo, but none of them is good in providing any solutions for the problems they identify. And shouting boo from the side won't make it better. So how can they engage with their authorities? We need to teach them that. They are very difficult to put themselves in the position of the others. They say, we're right, and therefore they have to do what we tell them they have to do. It doesn't work that way. You have to convince the others, you have to get in dialogue, you have to put it forward. And in certain ways, you really have to accept a loss. And not abandon by saying, they're not doing what we said they have to do, and therefore we don't want to talk with them, which happens a lot with the civil society. they consider themselves like the opposition, but to stay on board. Saying, even if you do something which we would like to do differently, don't worry, we'll keep a close eye and we help out where we can. That's dialogue. Another civil society, that's the last thing mentioned here, in my view, in our view, seems to be out of touch with their reality, with their constituents. They don't really know what the citizens need, because they've been so much transformed in public, in project management bodies of EU funding, that they have got out of touch with reality. We need to bring them back into contact with their real constituents, so that they really can address the needs. But we need some who know how to manage funds. We need some who can put forward, advocate for the needs, and we need some to be able to work with, to do something about it, and to assist the citizens. We are perhaps not the best example, but at least what we try, everything do in our program, is to touch base with the civil society organizations. We try to ask and find out from them, is this really necessary? We ask them to come forward with the ideas. I always say civil society is like a rainbow. You can't pick one color, it's all or nothing. But we need to invest in the primary colors, which make the other colors shine as well. We can't do everything. Often we're being looked up as the one who will salvage and save these initiatives of citizens in a little village. We are not best placed to do that. We are an elephant, and don't ask an elephant to feed ants, we'll squash them. So we need other intermediates, and one of them will speak later on, who can do that, probably. Since we identified that there is this problem in relations, putting needs forward to the authorities, but also in getting what's really the information on the needs were there, and also to make sure that civil society is respected by the citizens as their one of their interlocutors towards authorities, we said we need to provide some technical assistance. Not only in managing projects, making sure they do it right and all that, which is also essential when it comes to my financial people, who every time when we have signed a contract, I say at the kick-off event to the winners, now, you signed, the ink is dry, we thought you were the best out of the thousands of proposals which we received, but now the ink is dry, we're going to look at you as a possible thief of EU money, so you need to justify every euro you spend with us, and that's painstaking. But I can't make the rules bending, I have to apply them, but I at least can try to make it easier for them to understand, to insist. And that's another thing which we do for technical assistance. Our grant support has been always what I tend to call guerrilla funding, hit and run. We have all these civil society organizations saying we need money to deal with this, that and so on and all that. So we did a call, we selected some winners, we threw money at them, and they were silent for a year or two, and that was it. And then the project finished, we got the end report, put it in a drawer, but nothing stayed. You can't develop a civil society, you can't develop a country on a 2-year basis. We have to do longer. I always say it's like giving birth to a child. After birth, you have to follow it until it graduates from university, hopefully. But you can't just say it's just 2 years or a bit longer and that's it, bye-bye. So we have to find ways with the current rules which we have to get in more longer-term engagement. If you need to develop the sector, I always say competition is good, but in development it's more difficult to apply. So we need to still support the strongholds, these primary colors who can make the others shine. So we therefore developed in the first test framework partnerships, which allows us to engage with civil society organizations in a project for maximum 4 years, which is far too short still, but is already better than 2 years. We're now looking into ways with the new financial regulation, which allows us to do so, to go to operating grants. Not, sometimes I have the feeling that we force with our guidelines these organizations like dogs have to be taught certain tricks to do, but in the end they will never do it. Because they only do it because we asked it. But it's not something which really needs to be done. So we need to find ways to let them do what they are good at and what they should be doing. And that's with operating grants. We're going to have a call for that coming out before summer. And we're going to provide support to, in our case, because it's multi-country, organizations working at a multi-country level with their partners to actually pay the salary cost of the person who has to advocate, for instance, for the rights of Roma, who has to advocate for the rights of the LGBTIQA, and to make sure that they don't have to put it in the context of a project where they have to produce paper or report or a nice brochure or to do training, but to actually just do what they should be doing. And then it comes to the last bit, what we try to develop is sub-grant. Like I said, we are not best placed to feed the ants. We are not best placed to provide support to very small local initiatives. Don't ask the EU to deal with grants of up to 5,000 euro. My Director General already said we have to aim at projects of 2 million, apart from civil society, but globally, nothing less than 2 million, because it becomes impossible for us to manage. So we need others who can do that. So foundations who have experience in managing re-grant schemes, controlling it and providing us with the information my financial people would like to see, so that they're happy as well. The areas of activity which we currently have and we continue to focus on is we do understand there is a need to do local civic initiatives. When we had the first riots on the baby in Bosnia who could not go out of the country because they didn't have ID papers and they couldn't have corporations, the people got very upset. One of my colleagues called an organization in Bosnia and saying, what are you doing to support them? And they said, no, we can't do anything because we don't have a project with that. So that's something wrong. They should not do it because we have money for it. It should be automatically. But if they don't have the funds, they can't do anything. They can't print a leaflet if they don't have a project to charge it to. So we see what could we do to strengthen these initiatives, either by putting a capacity aside which they could use, like a resource center, like a technical assistance in the future. Then of course we have the people-to-people initiatives, where we said we want to bring different types of people, hopefully linked with civil society, together to learn a bit from how we tend to do things, to learn a bit more about our EU norms and values. We've done that only recently by getting them over to Brussels, and they bought a box of Leonidas chocolates and they listened to us and that was it. No, we on to the next phase, that they continue setting up networks with their partners, like for instance here in the Czech Republic, where they can learn how these things are being done and dealt with. And they can stay in touch. And not because there's a project, but because there is a relationship building up. And that will lead them to these famous partnership actions with the later on said, now we really did something, we've seen how they operate, we took part, did a common research or whatever we wanted to call it, and now we're going for a project. Or now we're going for a support in the operating grants. So the new approach that we had in the test phase of the framework partnership agreements, basically set down here, but the essential is we're going for a 4-year period. Split up probably in 2+2, because we still want to have some control. But it's important that we are into partnership. It's not because it's their project, so we let them do what we do. No, we want to go in a situation that together we shape the project. So we ask the partnership partners to come forward with an idea, and during the 4 years, we sit around and may here and there change and shift. I've had a lot of projects, and it really shocked me when they said, Henk, we had put forward that we're going to do 5 meetings, but we find out that perhaps 3 are enough. Can we do that change? And I said, why they're asking me? Of course they can. But I sometimes get the feeling that they're so being bashed by my delegation staff that they're too afraid to deviate from the project proposal. which is really, they put in a straitjacket. Well, they shouldn't be. They should be free to operate. So I always say, every time they ask me to change it, will it contribute for you to achieve your general objective better? If you think so, then please do so. That's all we want you to do. We look at the general objective and how you attend. We're not going to check you whether you had 50 persons attending the meeting or not. And that micromanagement thinking, perhaps has been brought up by my delegate, but it has to go. At least with us, we don't want that. Great. Last bit, that's preaching for my own flock. Why do we do things multi-country? Because often being asked when I talk with national delegations, how we can do that ourselves. Why do we have to go multi-country? Well, of course, there are certain things which have a regional dimension. And as I said, sometimes it's easier for them to work with a foreigner than to work with a compatriot in the country. They're so competitive towards each other, which is a bit also our mistake. If you do a call for proposals, you basically invite everybody to kill each other, to say, no, I'm much better than the other organization, because the other organization is too close to you. I don't really want that. We want them to work together to go for one. That means that some may die, but okay, unfortunately, but we can't cover everything. So then it's easier for them to cooperate with someone from another country. We have seen sensitive issues. If you're going to talk, let's face it, you're a government of a country in the Western Balkans. You don't want to say, well, my first proposal, which we're going to put forward to provide support for the European Commission, would be a national action against corruption. Because then you're basically telling everybody, we're corrupt. So you don't do that. But if it's a regional program, it's not much for you, but the other countries were corrupt, and yeah, since it's a regional program, obviously you're in it. So sometimes doing it together helps a bit. Of course, this was also economies of scale. Let's give an example. If you have the expert on project management in one project, in one country, the person cannot be used by the other country anymore. He's already employed. If you do it in a regional context, you can have the person shifting around doing exactly what he's good at doing. Thematic expertise, upstream work, partnership organization with key organization. That's another important thing. Civil society organizations in the Western Balkans are quite weak. And they have a very bad reputation, I think, I fear. So if they come along and say, okay, will we, the partner of WWF, increases a little bit of the credibility and the representativity of the organization. So we said sometimes it's good to work with strongholds from the EU who have the experience, also to make sure that certain doors, which normally would remain closed for you, are opened. And that's where we say that's what partnership is about, being stronger together. That's what the European Union is about, being stronger together. And yeah, the last thing, but it's mainly for us, I want to save the 200,000 euro which we normally spend on recruiting assessors to read all kinds of proposals. I want to do it in one shot and to save all the others expenses. So if we have framework partners which we sign agreements with, these framework partners can also be used by the delegations to sign contracts with. So instead of having a call for proposals in every country with 200 applicants and you can only award 10 projects, you probably end up with doing it only once. And that saves 7 times 200,000 euro, which could be used for other things. I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very clear presentation. I think that we covered the field. So now I think we are a little bit delayed, so I think we have space for 1-2 rounds maximum of questions, knowing that we have much more space for discussion after the panel discussion that would be like more open for your comments. So please, if you have any questions, comments to any of our speakers.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to ask about the cooperation with foundations. You mentioned that's a very important partner for you. I would like to ask you, how does it work actually in practice, and which foundations you work with?
Well, previously the foundations were very much supported by donor foundations, or like Soros always have and all that, or other donors. We always have these calls for proposals. We now work, for instance, with the TRAC, Balkan Civic Initiative Foundation, previously called like that, as a partner to re-granting. And for me it was important, but yeah, we are a commission, we always behind the others often. Because when I was in the Netherlands, there was an initiative of a private foundation supporting a lot of civil society organizations in the Western Balkans who decided to shift area of interest, which happens with a lot of donors. Western Balkans, we have to help them. Oops, there's a new, Sudan, let's put the money there. So there's nothing as weird as political support and all those, and that shifts. So all these foundations, which were in the countries already managing, that expertise was suddenly gone, finished. They had to hunt for other funds. And if they could have anticipated it, they may have had expertise to win in our calls for proposals, but some did not, and we lost that, which is a pity, because that was 10 years, 15 years of investment thrown through the window. So that's another thing where I said we have to stop doing that, because this hit and run guerrilla funding is not leading to long-term sustainability of the civil society, which is what we should all care for. So in the framework partners, we want to have organizations who can do re-granting, either as an FPA or in a separate setting. And they have that expertise, which we don't have, but we desperately need. Hope that answers a bit the question. It will always be by competitive procedure, unfortunately, unless I have a clear monopoly. But it's very hard to sell to my legal people, because if I say we have to give a contract to the International Lesbian and Gay Alliance, because they represent all of them in the world and based in Brussels, they will say, yeah, but if we do that, you may have a Serbian association. Yeah, but we are. And that's the problem. If this sector itself doesn't organize itself in the country saying, this is our national association, and they will bid, and then the money will filter through, then it's very difficult for us. I once compared much to criticism, so I changed it a bit to the next metaphor. I like metaphors. See, we have all these voices coming to us, which is confusing. So I said, could you please try to sing close harmony? That means that everybody have a different voice, different tone, different melodies even sometimes, but it's pleasant to hear for us, so we can digest it. Because otherwise it remains a problem for us. And then people say, yeah, but civil society is diverse, and therefore you should, sure. But it should not be to that extent diverse that it's confusing. And that's what it often is. And that's why it's very difficult for us to plan a program. So I said, group and put your priorities. So if we have that in Brussels, we have a social platform, where organization, okay, this should be the next priority, where we try to prioritize certain things towards towards us. And that needs to be done in these countries as well.
Thank you. Other questions?
Okay, if I can, Ivana Pečková, Czech Development Agency. Mr. Dopita mentioned that he sees some space for cooperation with bilateral donors and the Commission. And maybe I would like to hear Mr. Visser to elaborate on this topic, because I know that there are certain countries which European Commission is working on joint programming with them. But maybe if you can say some example about cooperation with bilateral donors, or how to improve this.
We have now an EPA regulation that we seek the comments and input of the member states in the drafting stage. So before, when we have put it all on paper, we want to have their views. In the field of civil society, one of the things we introduced was this technical assistance to civil society organizations. And the technical assistance has a sort of advisory board, which is called the Local Advisory Group, the LAG. And in that LAG, we have said that the EU delegation and all donors should be present. So to have some donor coordination locally, because a lot of times we've been rightfully told that we are very bad in donor coordination as a Commission. And I said, I completely agree, but could you then stop going to the European Parliament and say to the members of Parliament, you need to make sure we do more women empowerment in the Balkans? Because then they come to me as Parliament and say, you have to do a call on women empowerment. And I can't say to them, no, we're not doing it because the UN is doing already some, or they will have, they want to. And then we have 2 projects from 2 donors. So the donor coordination starts with you. You have to bring the needs coordinated to us. You should do your own coordination. And that's sometimes difficult for them. Someone once jokingly said, I get the impression I have to present everything on the silver plate to them before they start to move. And then a criticaster of civil society, who is from civil society in Europe, said, no, Henk, you don't even have to, not only you need to present it on the silver plate, you also need to chew it for them. Because otherwise nothing will happen. And that's really sad if one of their friends says that about them. So we have to make sure that they come forward themselves. So a good example which we have is that we always seek to get national experts from a member state. Well, not every member state has the funds available to present national experts to work with us, but we're lucky again to have someone from SIDA, Swedish aid, who will really focus on an issue which is strong and hard for the Swedes, which is gender. And she has to do some gender mainstreaming to all the programming, and she will come in our unit. And that's a way to coordinate the needs. Whenever I say to, in the preparation of documents, for any kind of strategy or whatever, I said, please mention what the member states have been doing, because if you mention it already in that document, it makes it easier for us to sell it later on to the management committee. And as you know, we have for each program, we have a management committee where we have representatives of the EU member states who will have another close look and may say, oh yeah, but you didn't mention the document that we from the Dutch government under the Matra funds are already providing support to this and that, so and so. They say, thank you very much for giving us, we'll put it in. And then we can build further on what they've been done there.
Okay. If there are no more questions for this part, since we are a little bit delayed, so let's have a 10 minutes break. We finish with the program part, but hopefully both our speakers are available for if you have other questions, or then you can also raise other issues for discussion for the second panel. And let's have a coffee or tea to have more for us for the second part, where we go more to the field and the project level with the experience from the civil society organizations.